President Muhammadu Buhari has finally signed the Electoral Act Amendment Bill into law. The president assented to the bill at a brief ceremony held at the Council Chamber of the State House in Abuja. Senate President Ahmed Lawan and Speaker of the House of Representatives Femi Gbajabiamila witnessed the signing of the bill. This comes barely a week to the expiration of the window the president had to take a decision on the proposed legislation, as required by the Nigerian Constitution. Having received the bill from the National Assembly on January 31st, various stakeholders, including political actors and civil society groups, had awaited its signing into law by the Nigerian leader. President Buhari had withheld his assent to the bill in November 2021, citing the cost of conducting direct primary elections, security challenges, and possible manipulation of electoral processes by political players as part of the reasons for his decision. For more on this, we're now being joined from Oxford, England, by Samson Itodo, Executive Director, YIAGA Africa, a non-profit civic hub of self-acclaimed changemakers committed to the promotion of democratic governance, human rights, and civic engagement. Welcome to the program, Samson Itodo.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abati, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, good to see you. I know I was trying to get hold of you yesterday, but yesterday you were attending your graduation ceremony at the University of Oxford. And I told you I was surprised that on February 22, you were at the Unity Fountain in Abuja, protesting against President Buhari, saying President Buhari must sign the electoral bill into law. And then all of a sudden, you showed up in Oxford. Well, congratulations to you on this new achievement. And I hope, as we say here on this platform, that it has implications. So when you get back to Nigeria, you have to worry about the implications of getting another degree. But very quickly, you wrote a piece on Friday, February 25, in which you said, look, if President Buhari went ahead to sign the electoral bill, that will strengthen the democratic credentials of the 2023 general elections. Well, 2-3 days after, do you still hold the same view, considering the fact that the president, yes, signed the bill? He responded to civil society, but he provided a caveat with regard to Section 84, subsection 12 of that particular piece of legislation.
Well, thanks, Dr. Abati. Yes, I still hold the view that the act assented to by the president has provisions that will improve the democratic credentials of the 2023 elections, or even before then, the Ekiti and the Osun governorship elections, for 3 reasons. The bill contains provisions that enhance the transparency of the results collation process. So a culmination of the provision on electronic transmission of results, the power of INEC to review election results declared in contravention of INEC guidelines and under duress, as well as the provision that redefines overvoting. In other words, the provision that confers legality on the figures generated by the smart card reader or the BVAS machines for electronic accreditation. So what we have now is, in determining overvoting, the INEC as well as the courts would look at, when the votes cast at an election exceed the total number of accredited voters. If you followed the elections conducted a few hours ago, particularly in Ungopala, in Imo, where the REC addressed the press and talked about the importance of the figures generated by BVAS for determination of accredited voters. So if you look at these provisions in the electoral bill, it would enhance the transparency of our results collation process. The second, major pillar in the bill signed into law by the president, it's the provision, that deals with the timelines for the conduct of specific electoral activities. In elections, time is of essence. And if certain activities are not conducted within certain timelines, it might render them a nullity or an illegality. What this law has done, it has, reviewed the timelines for conduct of primaries, the submission of list of candidates, and it make them early. So based on the timetable INEC issued yesterday, primaries are due to start on April 4th, down to 3rd of June. So we'll have early primaries, and it provides time for the courts to determine pre-election matters before we get into an election. So to the extent that this bill, provides and reviews timelines to facilitate early preparations, I would say early preparations, can contribute to improving these democratic credentials of inclusivity, of integrity, of transparency, and excellence. And the third major critical issue is that this act signed into law addresses latent gaps or lacuna in the current law. So you look at the mischief created as a result of the death of the late Governor Abubakar Audu, where election had commenced, but before a winner was returned and declarations were made, a candidate of the party dies. What the act now provides is it provides a solution to that particular gap. So when in a governorship election, a substantive candidate of a party dies, after election has commenced and then results are yet to be declared, what you have is the running mate of that particular party or that candidate will continue with the election and become the substantive candidate. But for legislative elections, because you do not have running mates, the political parties are given a timeline to field and submit list of new candidates. So these sort of three buckets really provide improvements in our electoral process. I won't talk about, issues around early funding for INEC. Again, that's also a major provision in this current act, that INEC will have funding, 1 year before the date of an election. This again cures, the challenge that we experienced in the 2019 election, where funding was released to INEC in the late hour, the build-up to 2019 elections. But of course, yes, INEC has issued new timetable with new dates. Civil society, one of the reasons why we went on the streets, last week to protest, or we declared a National Day of Protest, because we saw this happening. We made these projections that the president fails to sign the bill on February 22nd, by virtue of clause, now section 28 sub 1 of the electoral bill, the dates of the elections will definitely be moved. Now, INEC has issued new dates. It's moved the dates by to 25th and then 11th of March for governorship elections. But I think that provision on 84, where the president raised some issues, I think the arena of political competition and debate will move to the National Assembly, and whether the National Assembly will consider the request of the president to amend that section. Definitely, I want to believe there were deals that were struck by the presidency and the National Assembly. We don't know what going to be the outcome of that. But my view is, and as part of what civil society had demanded, that there is no perfect law, that the president should proceed, assent to it. If he has any issues, he should raise and send in an amendment. I'll wait to see the proposed amendments the president will send to the National Assembly beyond the speech he has made and provide a justification. He talks about the conflict to Section 40 as well as Section 42 of the Constitution, and how the provision of 84 sub 12 will infringe on the constitutional rights of political appointees. I think there are moral arguments that can be advanced. There are legal arguments that can be advanced. But I'll wait to see what proposal will be made and whether his request, has some merit, either in law or in morality or in politics. I think is a subject for determination in the days or weeks ahead.
Okay, yes, Samson, you've more or less covered the field, but I thought you were also going to talk about Section 54 of the new law, which talks about the rights of persons with disabilities, persons who are usually discounted. We talked about Section 3, subsection 3, which talks about early funding of INEC and some of the other relevant sections, including the electronic transmission of results and all of that. But Section 84, subsection 12, is where the problem lies. If you look at the Constitution at the moment, Section 66 of the Constitution is imparting material or no force, more or less, with the expectation in Section 84, subsection 12, that the president is complaining about. Because it says, political office holders must relinquish their positions 30 days before election. What the lawmakers have now done is to say in Section 84, subsection 12, that in fact you have to relinquish your position before the primaries so that there can be a level playing field. So in my view, Section 40 or 42 may not even be the problem. The problem is creating a level playing field so that political office holders do not hijack the process, or they do not hijack the process by proxy, you know, through their godfathers. But what specific advice will you give to the National Assembly? Should they just ignore the president now that we have a law on the table? Or do you suspect that a deal has been struck and this law, this National Assembly led by Ahmad Lawan and Femi Gbajabiamila, who have confessed with their own mouths that whatever the president wants is what they will do? Do you think they will just go ahead and prove to us that this is just a rubber stamp assembly, even if it is not in the interest of the public good to act in that manner?
Well, thanks. So there are a few issues here, and I think that in the days ahead we will try to unpack this on, you know, what's the rationale, what's the philosophy behind this insertion? Because first it was an insertion that was introduced into that particular provision when the president returned the bill and the National Assembly was reworking the bill. That particular clause has been a source of tension from the enactment of both the 2006 and the 2010 Act. If you recall, Dr. Abati, there was that debate as to the delegate status of political appointees and why we had a provision where political appointees cannot be, delegates at party primaries, is so it doesn't confer undue advantage to their principals, and in this case, whether governors or the appointing authority. But now they inserted this, and whether this runs in conflict, with provisions of the Constitution. The truth is, the provisions of the Constitution would always take precedence. My advice, to the National Assembly is to look at this on its merit. That will this particular bill, with that particular provision, provide or confer undue advantage on certain classes of people? Does it in any way infringe on people's, rights to contest or run for office? My sense is, provided you've become a political appointee, you have access, to certain resources. You have access to certain intelligence that other members of your parties who are not political appointees will have. And I think that for people who are going to be running for office as political appointees, they should resign their position, bearing in mind that the primaries are not an isolated activity out of the electoral process. So when we talk about elections, we don't see elections as just what happened on election day. That the pre-election activities are also considered as part of elections. So when you say elections, it's not just what happens on election day, the primaries, and when INEC issues timetable, it issues timetable and schedule of activities for the election. So it's all part of the elections. This can be subjected to different interpretations. My advice to the National Assembly is to look at the sum total of these issues. But I also have my concern, and which is, does this National Assembly, have the spine, to push back on the proposal by the president? My guess is no. I think that the leadership of the National Assembly will do the bidding of the president, and this may be as a result of either deals that have been struck Perhaps he gave the condition why he would assent to this bill will be that they delete that section, because the way the president actually spoke, he spoke with a lot of conviction, and he was almost sounding like he was giving the National Assembly a directive to delete that particular section. Well, the National Assembly members have an opportunity to prove to Nigerians and prove to the world that the decisions that they make when laws are passed is to advance public interest, is to defend national interest, and not seek to pacify or impress any president or any individual. And when they go back to look at this issue, I'm really looking forward to how the National Assembly will handle this. But they have an opportunity, to show to Nigerians that they are first guided by public interest. And I don't think that the position of the president, to the extent that he issued that directive, is in line with the general interest of the public. And in any case, I want to also advise the National Assembly that they shouldn't consider this particular proposal by just debating this on the floor of the House. This is an amendment, so you should go through the process, subject that proposal to public debate, let political parties, let civil society and citizens, come to the National Assembly and present their opinions, and then the National Assembly can take a position, on that particular clause. But if they go on by taking unilateral decisions and forcing it down the throats of other lawmakers, I think it will be considered an aberration of our entire lawmaking process. And I don't think that for an act of this nature that commands the popular acceptance of the Nigerian people, it should be tainted with provisions that are not in tandem with our collective interest. So subject that proposal, to public debate, and let the preponderance of opinion, inform how the National Assembly will take a decision on this particular issue.
Okay, civil society played a major role in getting the president to give his assent to this bill. The same bill that he had rejected, many times. I mean, some of your colleagues say if he had refused to sign, it would have been the 6th time that he had refused to sign between 2015 and now. And on February 22, you were there, joining others to put pressure on the president. So do you think that where we are now with this new electoral framework is some kind of triumphalism for civil society? Or do you consider it, the president indicating that he is truly committed to leaving behind a legacy of a credible electoral framework? Or do you think that in any case, given the pressures coming from all directions, that the president had no choice in the matter? In other words, how significant is this?
Well, Dr. Abati, I'd say that the president assenting to this bill is victory for democracy and victory for the Nigerian people. But this victory can only, be complete if the outcome of the 2023 elections and subsequent elections that will be regulated by this legislation, is a reflection of the will and the aspiration of the Nigerian people and the voters. And so there will be several indicators that we use to measure whether this victory is indeed, a worthy victory. Because if it doesn't change the character, of our political class and their attitude towards power and attitude towards elections, then I would say it would have been an effort in futility. Because it's one thing to have a bill, it's another for the bill. And one thing to have a law is another thing for the law to be implemented to the latter. And you have politicians, looking for ways to circumvent the process. And I tell you, I know for a fact that as the president was assenting to that bill on Friday at 12:25 p.m., there were politicians who were also having their own plans on how to circumvent certain provisions in that law. This is why we've called on, the National Assembly to gazette this bill, make it available. Citizens have a role to understand the provisions of the bill and see how they place a demand on the system. I think it's victory for the Nigerian people because the way, the National Assembly handled this entire amendment process and the president was influenced by, civic action. If you recall, Dr. Abati, in June last year, before the report of the committees was submitted at plenary, there were deletions and insertions that were introduced into the law. When civil society and media exposed that particular issue and how electronic transmission had been deleted from the bill, how the power vested on INEC to review results, how campaign spending limits were increased, there was a lot of public outcry. To those people, those Nigerians who spoke, whether on social media, the stakeholders who kept asking those questions and pressuring their lawmakers, I think they should feel proud that at that critical time they spoke and the National Assembly had no choice. We started seeing lawmakers actually coming to condemn that, and some of them denied. But at the end of the day, it was obvious that somebody or a group of people in the National Assembly were hell-bent on torpedoing the progressive provisions within the electoral law. If you also look at, the whole debate around electronic transmission of results, how the Senate reversed itself, recommitted the bill, and reversed itself on the position. We're issuing conditional provisions for the introduction of electronic transmission of results. It took pressure from citizens. And also with the last protest, and in fact, in December last year, I recall civil society also reviewed the bill, identified drafting errors and cross-referencing gaps, and concerned that the president might also leverage on those gaps, to decline assent like he has done in the past, exposed those drafting errors. When we saw the final version of the bill, all those errors were resolved. And the cross-referencing gap issues were resolved, and 98% of them. It only took vigilance. And what we're taking from here is for Nigerians who think that it's impossible, to influence government, to take decisions and defend the interest of the people. But the electoral bill has demonstrated that it is possible. And so citizens should continue to engage, working closely with media organizations. And we can't underestimate the role that the media played. It's not just civil society or citizens. Media kept this issue on the front burner of public discourse, asking the difficult questions and extracting commitment from National Assembly members as well as those from the presidency. So I would say it's victory for democracy. It's shown that citizens matter when it comes to democracy. But then it's also in line with the president's promise to bequeath to Nigerians a credible electoral process. I think what he has done is a partial fulfillment of that promise. The promise will be complete if at the end of the Ekiti, the Osun, and the 2023 presidential and national and the general elections, that one, there is a secured environment for the conduct of these elections, that the civic space, the media space, will be free, and journalists and media organizations can report on elections without fear of intimidation, that civil society and citizens can exercise, their rights of participation without any obstacle, or that the judiciary will be independent to review or take action or interpret the law without any fear of interference. Only then can we say that he has fulfilled his promise to bequeath to Nigerians a credible electoral process. Because let's not make the mistake to think that signing an electoral bill is sufficient to deliver credible elections. It's going to take the cooperation of the security agencies. Their professionalism, their impartiality is critical to the success of the elections. Also, other government agencies and institutions. So it's beyond the law. So I think he has partially, I would say to an extent, maybe 30% of what is required. The other 70% is going to be around the implementation of the law, as well as the intervening actions by other agencies of government under his control and supervision who are involved in the whole electoral governance architecture.
Well, I mean, Samson Itodo, I'm sure Professor Akintenewa, who's also going to comment on this subject shortly, will agree with you. He will say you cannot be more correct because the true test of any law is in its implementation. But there are also persons who say this particular piece of legislation does not go far enough in terms of its content, that we still have unresolved issues, like, for example, diaspora voting, independent candidacy. What do you say about all of that? Do you think that these are new possibilities for us as we move forward and we further seek to deepen the electoral process? And will you say that by signing this bill into law, that President Buhari would seem to have at least, taken another step towards building a strong legacy for his administration? Although I know the caveats that you provided.
Well, I think he has done, like I mentioned, a bit of that, and it requires to do more. And I don't think it's asking for too much. Nigerians shouldn't, when Dr. Abati, when public officials are elected, they are elected to solve problems. They are elected to take responsibilities for our challenges and address them. And I don't think it's too much if Nigerians demand more than this. And the president isn't doing Nigerians a favor in any case. He's only performing his constitutional responsibility. So as much as we commend him, we must also note that first, he contested for the votes of the Nigerian people, and the Nigerian people gave him power in trust. And when he takes actions of this nature, whilst we commend him, we must also hold him to higher standards. And I don't think signing the electoral bill is enough, because the character of our politicians, that you can have the law, but you always have their way and their shenanigans. You can see how different institutions of protection within a democratic setting have been captured. The judiciary, and I dare say that, can the judiciary deliver electoral justice today? If you look at even reports from public institutions like the ICPs around the corruption in the judiciary, and how political matters have been managed by judges. Look at the appointment process of our judges. So there's just a whole lot. So I think, yes, we thank him, but he needs to do more, and let him not go to sleep thinking that because I've assented to this law, it means I have delivered credible elections to Nigeria. No, it's going to take more than that. On the point you raised about independent candidacy, the good thing is we're going into another crucial week where the National Assembly will be considering 68 proposed amendments to the Constitution. Some of the issues that you've raised, independent candidacy, as part of the bills that the National Assembly will be voting on. Diaspora voting is also part of the bill. There are other constitutional amendment bills around creation of additional seats for women, around local government autonomy. These are progressive bills, and we urge the National Assembly members to pass these bills. My experience with working on constitution review, independent candidacy at all times that it has featured since the 7th, the 8th National Assembly, they were all passed by the National Assembly. But when it went to the State House of Assemblies, they didn't survive the votes at the states. I hope this time, even if the National Assembly passes this independent candidacy, which I think they will, that the states, at least two-third majority, that's about 24 states, will pass this legislation. So it becomes law. And when it becoms law, when it's passed by the states, when it goes to the president assents to the bills. Dr. Abati, in the 8th Assembly, the National Assembly passed 35 bills, constitutional alteration bills. At the end of the day, the president only assented to 5, even though only 15 survived at the states. We hope that the National Assembly fast-track this process, because some of those constitutional amendment bills also might have some implications for the 2023 election. So we look forward to the votes at the National Assembly this week on the amendments to the 1999 Constitution.
Well, thank you very much, Samson Itodo. Executive Director, YIAGA Africa, Youth Initiative for Advocacy, Growth and Advancement. And I recall that it was YIAGA Africa that led the process of getting the Not Too Young to Run bill assented to by President Muhammadu Buhari. And now you guys have done it again, the Coalition of Civil Society Organizations. Thank you very much. And don't forget the point I raised at the beginning of our conversation about the implications of your new degree when you get back. Congratulations once again. Thank you very much.